I don't think to date I've really gone into this in depth other than a brief short on Toast Bar. So today what we're going to discuss is abdominal training, facts and fallacies. We're going to talk about a couple of different things like the body fat ranges for men and women, to see your abs, what kind of training you need to do, spot reduction, planking, all that kind of stuff. All right, so first of all, like most things, we got to start off with an anatomy lesson, all right? So the main bulk of the abdominals, the actual six-pack muscles, is what's referred to as the rectus abdominis. So it's that sheath that kind of lines the front of your anterior plane. There's other key components to your abdominal musculature as well, like deeper you have your transverse abdominis, quadratus lumborum, you got your internal and external obliques, up by the lats you got the intercostals and the anterior serratus. But the six-pack though, okay, going back to the six-pack, the rectus abdominis, the abs, the shape of your six-pack is largely defined by how it hypertrophies through the ligaments on your anterior plane. And that's largely a genetic thing. So ultimately the shape of your abdominals, whether you have a six-pack, four-pack, eight-pack, three-pack, whatever, is going to have to do with how the rectus abdominis muscle hypertrophies through the sheath that is that linea alba ligament separation. This is why some people's abs are lopsided and some people have different numbers. It has nothing to do with exercises or special training methods or they use this device or whatever. No. It has everything to do with, the rectus abdominis and obliques and all the others are muscles the same as every other muscle. They respond to mechanical stress. They hypertrophy. And as they hypertrophy, they have nowhere to grow except out in front of you. And as they grow out, they kind of grow out through that sheath of ligaments that I showed you in the earlier slide, and that's what gives them their shape. So unfortunately, save surgery or some kind of crazy injury, you're really not going to change the shape of your abs. What you got what you're born with. But that said, you can certainly expose them and make them thicker and more pronounced with certain training and being lean. All right, so speaking of being lean, before we move on to training, let's get the elephant out of the room, okay? Spot reduction is, for all intents and purposes, not possible. Why do I say for all intents and purposes? Because you're not actually going to lose fat specifically from your love handles, your lower abs, whatever the case may be, but you can, through a variety of tricks, generate the facade of spot reduction. So for instance, if you eat less bulk forming fibrous foods a couple days before a photo shoot or whatever, you can keep like your lower abs a little bit flatter. You can manipulate your water in such a way that your skin's really thin so it's kind of tight. And then on top of that, you can, carb up, basically, pre-contest bodybuilding type stuff. You can carb up. Your rectus abdominis is like any other muscle, so it can get pumped, filled with blood, filled with glycogen, spread out the loose skin to give it the appearance of being a little bit leaner down there. But all of these things are marginal, temporary benefits as opposed to actually causing spot reduction. So just because it looks like your favorite influencer has figured out some kind of hack to make like lower belly fat go away in 48 hours or whatever, it's not a hack. There's no tricks, okay? It's just manipulating other factors to get a temporary visual effect, but the fat's still there. In order to actually lose your lower belly fat, your love handle fat, you just have to diet longer. That's the thing that most people that don't bodybuild or just don't have the patience to just do this for a long period of time, they miss out. That's why I say consistency is a superpower. That is one of the things that a lot of people are never going to find out because they just don't do this long enough. That segues really nicely into body fat percentages where you see your abs. So for men, it's usually around like 15 to 17%. and then 15 to 18, and then add another 5 to that for women, right? So, for women, like we'll call it, 20 to like 23, 25%. And it's an individual thing, right? So for some people, 25%, you might still be a little fluffy, whereas I've known females that have very clear abs at 25%. Some you got to get as low as like 17, 18%. Men, same thing. Some people's abs or some men's abs start showing up around like 15, 16%. For me, I got to get down to like 12, 13 before I start seeing them. And then like, between 8 and 12 for them to like really start popping. So again, it's an individual thing, but that's right around where you start seeing your abs. And that's the reason why, like I said earlier, you're not really going to get that crisp, like no lower belly fat, no love handle fat, or even like abdominal vascularity until you just lean into that diet for like 24 weeks, 36 weeks, and you can do it in a phasic manner. You can diet down from, let's say you're a man, you diet down from 25% to 20, and that takes you, let's call it, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, right? Then you do a maintenance phase for like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks to kind of just get used to your new body. And then once you alleviate whatever diet fatigue you might have had, then you do another dip and drop from, that 20% down to like a 15, 16%. And then at that point, for those of you that are thinking about, for instance, doing like a physique competition, or you want to do like a photo shoot or something like that, that's the point where now you're in shape to get in shape, and you can get exotically lean into the single digits or the low double digits if you're a female. But again, all that to say, you're not going to spot reduce any of these areas. The only way you can really expose like the lower abs, get rid of the love handles, is to just diet not harder, but longer. Not harder, okay? Too much of a deficit, too much training, your cortisol will run high, you'll start to hold water where you have loose skin, where you've lost a lot of fat. The end result, the end outcome visually is not really going to be what you want. Then the other thing I want to add with that is there is some truth to fat distribution in terms of hormones. So, depending on your estrogenicity or androgenicity, in other words, like how kind of female or male you trend hormonally, you will have, depending on that, a little bit more or less fat distribution in certain areas. It's not a bad thing. It's just kind of how your hormone profile is. Again, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you just put in the time and slowly creep down, do a maintenance phase, then slowly creep down again, and then pretty soon, if you just stay there long enough, that becomes your new normal. All right, so now, real briefly, let's go over training. And I say briefly because there really isn't too much to abdominal training, right? The rectus abdominis is like any other muscle. You need to flex it under mechanical tension in order to make it hypertrophy. Planks aren't going to give you a six-pack. Why? Because they're isometric. There's no tissue glide, and so there's no reason for the muscle to get bigger. There's mechanical tension, but it's constant mechanical tension. There's no concentric or eccentric component. Isometrics are great for strength. They'll make you freakishly strong, but because of the lack of tissue glide, you don't get very much hypertrophy from them. So anything where you flex the spine, crunches, sit-ups, toes to bar, leg raises, whatever, do those. As far as volume and frequency, with abs, I typically lean towards higher volume work because since abs are responsible for stabilizing your midsection, they are amenable to a lot of volume and not a crazy amount of loading. So I recommend anything between like 10 and 30. And then as far as how often, that is up to you to decide. I like to train abs every day because I don't find them particularly fatiguing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's how you have to train them. Like any other muscle you want to grow, I train it at least once, if not 2 or 3 times a week. But again, the main component to getting your abs is just giving the diet plenty of time to work.